Good evening. Welcome to South Asia Newsline. I'm Yeshi Johnson. Here are the top stories we are tracking for you on Tuesday, the 14th of September. India on par to become major defense exporter, says Prime Minister Modi in Uttar Pradesh. World donors pledge $1.1 billion in aid for Afghanistan. And US Secretary of State hits out at Pakistan, says Islamabad involved in harboring Taliban. And now for all the details. In the run-up to the assembly election in northern Uttar Pradesh state next year, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday laid the foundation stone of a university and visited the exhibition models of the Aligarh node of Defence Industrial Corridor. Speaking at an event, Prime Minister Modi said that India is on a rising path to becoming a major defence exporter.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday said that India is no longer known as defence importer, but is on a rising path to becoming a major defence exporter. PM Modi, who reached the northern Uttar Pradesh state on Tuesday, visited the exhibition models of Aligarh node of Defence Industrial Corridor. He also laid down the foundation stone of State University, named after freedom fighter and Jat King, Raja Mahendra Pratap Singh. Speaking at an event, Prime Minister said not only the country but the whole world is witnessing India manufacturing defence equipment from modern grenades and rifles to fighter aircraft, drones and warships.
आजादी के 75 साल हो गए, हम मंगवाते रहते हैं। इस छवि से बाहर निकलकर दुनिया के एक अहम डिफेंस एक्सपोर्टर की नई पहचान बनाने के संकल्प के साथ आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। भारत की इस बदलती पहचान का एक बहुत बड़ा केंद्र ये हमारा उत्तर प्रदेश बनने वाला है।
The Defence Industrial Corridor was announced by Prime Minister Modi during the Uttar Pradesh Investors Summit in Lucknow in 2018, which have 6 nodes: Aligarh, Agra, Kanpur, Chitrakoot, Jhansi and Lucknow. This will help in making the country self-reliant in the field of defence production and promoting Make in India. Making the first of many scheduled visits ahead of the upcoming polls in Uttar Pradesh, the Prime Minister also praised Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath for his efforts. The PM said UP is now an attractive place for investors in the country.
An outbreak of dengue and viral fever has continued to wreak havoc in India's northern Uttar Pradesh and central Madhya Pradesh states. Serpentine queues of patients were witnessed on Tuesday outside hospitals in parts of Uttar Pradesh, where authorities have swung into action to destroy mosquito breeding grounds. An outbreak of dengue and viral fever has overwhelmed India's most populous Uttar Pradesh state, where dozens of deaths have been reported since the start of September. Long queues of patients were witnessed outside hospitals in the northern state on Tuesday, which has reported over 90 deaths due to viral and dengue so far. At least 60 people have died from viral fever, including 5 from dengue in Firozabad district alone, an official said on Tuesday. Hospitals have set up dedicated special wards as the number of patients continue to rise, raising fears that Uttar Pradesh is in the midst of its worst dengue outbreak in years.
200 से 300 मरीज बुखार के होते हैं, उसमें से सभी को चिकित्सक के द्वारा देखा जाता है और जिनकी चिकित्सक की मरीजों को आवश्यकता होती है, जैसे कि डेंगू की, मलेरिया की, टाइफाइड फीवर की, उन सभी की जांच कराई जाती है। तो प्रतिदिन लगभग 7 से 8 मरीज भर्ती हो रहे हैं बुखार के, जिनकी डेंगू, मलेरिया और टाइफाइड की जांच कराई जा रही है। तो डेंगू अभी हमारे सितंबर में 7 केस सितंबर में आए हैं।
Meanwhile, central Madhya Pradesh has also reported hundreds of dengue cases, mainly in Gwalior and Indore districts, prompting authorities to launch campaign to destroy mosquito breeding grounds. Dengue fever, which can cause intense pain in muscles and joints, is spread by the bite of the Aedes aegypti mosquito. The insect thrives in the megacities of the tropics. Most patients survive the disease, but it is estimated to kill about 20,000 globally every year. In news from Afghanistan, at the UN meeting in Geneva on Monday, which was attended by more than 90 states, the international community pledged over $1 billion in humanitarian aid for Afghanistan, said UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Poverty and hunger have spiraled in Afghanistan since the Islamist Taliban took power, and foreign aid has dried up, raising the specter of a mass exodus.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said on Monday donors pledged more than $1 billion to help Afghanistan as poverty and hunger have spiraled in the country since the Islamist Taliban took power and foreign aid has dried up, raising the specter of a mass exodus. Guterres said it was impossible to say how much of the money had been promised in response to an emergency UN appeal for $606 million to meet the most pressing needs of a country in crisis. After decades of war and suffering, Afghans are facing perhaps their most perilous hour, he said in his opening remarks to donor conference in Geneva.
Today, we already heard clearly more than $1 billion of pledges. It is impossible, as I said, to say how much of this will be for the flash appeal, but in any case, it represents a quantum leap in relation to the financial commitment of the international community towards the Afghan people.
With billions of dollars of aid flows abruptly ending due to Western antipathy and distrust towards the Taliban, several speakers in Geneva said donors had a moral obligation to keep helping Afghans after a 20-year engagement. Earlier, members of Afghanistan's business community on Monday demanded the country's assets to be unfrozen as they met to plan future strategy for the country's trade and business. Much of the Afghan central bank's $10 billion in assets are parked overseas, where they are considered a key instrument for the West to pressure the Taliban. The U.S. Treasury Department said it is not easing Taliban sanctions or loosening curbs on Islamist groups' access to global financial system. The International Monetary Fund has also blocked the Taliban from accessing some $440 million in new emergency reserves.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said the United States is reviewing its relationship with Pakistan, which has been involved in harboring the members of Taliban. During a congressional hearing on Monday, Blinken said Pakistan has a multiplicity of interests that are in conflict with Washington.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Monday said Pakistan has been involved in harboring members of Taliban, and the United States will be looking at its relationship with Islamabad in the coming weeks to formulate what role Washington would want it to play in the future of Afghanistan. Responding to questions by the first public congressional hearing about Afghanistan since last month's collapse of the US-backed Afghan government, Blinken said Pakistan has a multiplicity of interests, some that are in conflict with Washington. Pakistan has been accused of supporting the Taliban as it battled the US-backed government in Kabul for 20 years, charges Islamabad has denied.
This is one of the things that we're going to be looking at in the days and weeks ahead, the role that Pakistan has played over the last 20 years, but also the role that we would want to see it play in the coming years, and what it will take for it to do that.
Meanwhile, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi on Monday told the United Nations that observance of human rights by the Taliban in Afghanistan was linked to unfreezing of Afghan assets as the war-torn country faces an economic collapse without foreign aid assistance. Pakistan is considered as one of the two countries along with Qatar with the most influence over the Taliban, and a place where many senior Taliban leaders were thought to have escaped to after the US-led invasion of Afghanistan in 2001.
Moving on, locals in illegally occupied region of Gilgit Baltistan recently staged a protest over shortage of doctors and other medical and technical staff in a hospital in Yasin Valley. They blamed that the government is making no serious attempts to address the demand, leaving them to suffer.
Locals staged a protest recently over the shortage of doctors and other medical and technical staff in Yasin Valley of Gilgit Baltistan, lamenting government's apathy. The protesters demanded the posting of specialist doctors and technicians in the illegally occupied region and warned of continued protests if their demands were not met.
कभी यहाँ हम आते डॉक्टर नहीं मिलता है, कभी टेक्नीशियन नहीं मिलता है। 1974 में हॉस्पिटल बना है, आज तक यहाँ कोई टेक्नीशियन नहीं है।
This is not the first time. Locals have long raised the issue of shortage of doctors and medical staff in the region, blaming that the government is making no serious attempts to address the demand, leaving them to suffer. They say they have now become increasingly intolerant of Pakistani occupation as Islamabad consistently maintains a negligent attitude towards the illegally occupied territory and ignores even their basic demands.
In news from Nepal, Nepal's main opposition party, CPN-UML-Communist Party of Nepal, unified Marxist-Leninist, has been obstructing the proceedings of both the houses of the parliament, accusing Speaker Agni Prasad Sapkota being biased against their party. On Monday, the CPN-UML boycotted the all-party meeting called by Speaker Sapkota. According to the UML, the Speaker Sapkota should either announce dismissal of 14 former UML lawmakers as recommended by the party, or step down to pave the way for the election of new Speaker of the House of Representatives. They alleged that Sapkota facilitated a split in the UML by not confirming the expulsion of the lawmakers, including Madhav Kumar Nepal. After the government brought a new ordinance lowering the threshold for splitting political parties, Madhav Kumar Nepal split the party and formed a new party, CPN Unified Socialist. Meanwhile, the parliament session has been put off till September 14 amid protest by the UML. A pre-independence era film theatre in India's southern Madurai city has continued to run movies using reels at a time when digital platform has taken over the world of cinema. The staff at the theatre are trained to operate the reel machine, which has helped in keeping the traditional method of movie watching alive and preserve its legacy. A nearly century-old film theatre, which is one of the last in the world to survive on cinema reels in southern India's Madurai city, is working hard to preserve its legacy. Established in 1939, the Central Theatre of Madurai is a well-known theatre complex, which has been running movies using reels at a time when digital platform had taken over the world of cinema. The staff at the theatre is well trained to operate the reel machine, which has also helped to keep the traditional method of movie watching alive. But with the changing times, the owners are also trying to shift to digital platform and screen movies both ways.
அதாவது இன்னும் ரீல் ஓட்டுறதுக்கு நிறைய பேர் எங்களை நம்பி இருக்கிறாங்க. அவங்களுக்காவது நாங்கள் ரீல் ஓட்ட வேண்டிய சூழ்நிலையில் நாங்கள் இருக்கோம். ஏன்னா எத்தனையோ இன்னும் டிஸ்ட்ரிபியூட்டர்ஸ் இன்னும் பெட்டி வச்சு தான் ஓட்டிகிட்டு இருக்காங்க. கியூப் இப்போ தான் மாறிட்டு வராங்க அவங்கெல்லாம்.
The theatre has a seating capacity of 950 people and has priced its tickets at merely 40 rupees for men and 15 rupees for women. A resident in the temple town said she visits the theatre every time old movies are screened and still enjoys the old world charm of real cinema. Well, that's the way it was in South Asia this evening. Before we conclude, the top stories once again. India on par to become major defence exporter, says Prime Minister Modi in Uttar Pradesh. World donors pledge $1.1 billion in aid for Afghanistan. And US Secretary of State hits out at Pakistan, says Islamabad involved in harboring Taliban. Now our viewers can watch the show on SouthAsiaNewsline.com. You can also visit us on Facebook.com/AsiaNewsline and follow us on Twitter @AsiaNewsline. That's all in tonight's edition. We will see you same time tomorrow. Good night.